Good morning. I'm Michael McCall, Chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee. Let me just first acknowledge and give our condolences to the victims this last Sunday. As we all know, last Sunday was the deadliest attack in the homeland since 9/11. Today at 3 o'clock in the Capitol Visitor Center, I'll be moderating a classified briefing with the FBI Director, Comey, Secretary Jay Johnson, and NCTC Director Rasmussen. We will be pressing the administration for answers as to what happened, to find out what happened, and to see what we can do in the future to prevent a situation like that from happening in the future. All too often, we're seeing these events since Boston, Fort Hood, Chattanooga, San Bernardino, and now this event. The homeland is under attack, and it's in one of the highest threat environments I've seen since 9/11. Let me just say that the suspect, the Orlando shooter, was under the radar on several occasions. There are flags in this case that we will be examining in our oversight responsibilities. He traveled both to Saudi Arabia and to the Emirates on 2 separate occasions in 2011, 2012. They came under the radar of the FBI in 2013 for making inflammatory comments about connections to Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah and other remarks. And then in 2014, by attending the same mosque as the first American foreign fighter suicide bomber in Syria. These connections are all very concerning to us. It's something that we'll be taking a very close look at. I want to commend the leadership behind me for supporting me and my committee in our legislative efforts. And Leader McCarthy and I will be introducing legislation in the short term in response to these horrific acts to do what we can in the Congress in addition to our oversight responsibility. We can't stop them all. We've arrested 85 ISIS followers in this country. We've had 75 plots against the West. We've stopped many of these. It's the one that you don't know about that keeps you up at night. This one certainly kept us up at night. And I pray that we don't have any more in this country. With that, I yield to the Speaker.
Over the weekend, we saw the worst terror attack on our soil since 9/11. We continue to mourn the dead and pray for a swift recovery to those who are injured. But we need to be clear about who did this. This was another act of war against America by radical Islam. At the same time, let's also be clear. Members of the LGBT community were the targets. They were simply attacked for who they are. This is an ideology that rejects who we are as a country: open, tolerant, free. It preys on the vulnerable and the insecure, seeking to radicalize them into murderers. This is a threat that knows no borders. This is a threat that cannot be contained. This is a threat that simply must be defeated. And right now, the president doesn't have a plan to get the job done. That's why last week, House Republicans introduced what we believe is a better way for national security. In it are 67 ideas to keep America safe, including many to address homegrown terrorism. And of course, the House has acted on numerous occasions to address this terrorist threat. And we will continue to do so, because we must stop people who want to do us harm from coming here. We must give our intelligence and law enforcement communities the tools that they need, and we must work with the committees and communities to prevent radicalization before it starts. Above all, we must never back down.
We continue to mourn the loss of the innocent American lives. They were taken because of terrorism. I want to lay out to you exactly what we've been doing about it, preparing before, and the actions that we have taken. The Speaker asked, after we saw what transpired of the other terrorist attacks, even that were abroad in Paris. So we put a task force together of our committees. We have moved 9 bills off this floor in a large bipartisan manner. 3 of them that deal directly with the radicalization inside America of terrorism. 6 dealing with counterterrorism bills. Unfortunately, they sit inside the Senate. So this week, we will take these actions. First, today, we'll recess the House so everyone can attend the member-only classified briefing that Chairman McCall spoke of. Chairman McCall's committee as well has already had a hearing scheduled coming up. We'll move it up and dealing with the Orlando attack. And finally, we will change our schedule this week to repackage the bills that have already passed. It can deal with this for the future into one, resending it to the Senate and asking them to take it up. These are large bipartisan bills. These are ones that can help fight what is going on around the world and now within our own country. For the sake of those innocent individuals who have lost their lives, we have to make sure it does not happen again and that we're both best prepared to fight.
My prayers continue to go out to the victims of this terrorist attack in Orlando. An attack on any American is an attack on all Americans, and we have to stand with those who were attacked by radical Islamic terrorism in Orlando. We've seen too many of these. Countless times there have been attacks on America's homeland. That's why the House has taken action. That's why the House laid out, again, a detailed plan, 67 points, how to go out and actually stand up and have a plan to defend America's homeland. If the majority leader pointed out, we've passed a number of bills out of the House already over the last few months to focus on addressing the problem of radicalization amongst terrorists here in the United States. It's time for the President to join with us in moving these bills forward and getting them signed into law to put a sharper focus on how to address a real threat that is here in America. It's not something that's coming, it's here. We've seen attack after attack by terrorists in the United States, and it's got to end.
I want to thank Chairman Michael McCall for joining us this morning. We were all heartbroken by the tragedy in Orlando over the weekend. And as we mourn together, we're learning of tragic news out of France this morning. A reminder that these are fighters embedded across Europe, and the threat around the world continues. Violence of any kind is cowardly, and it goes against our values. As a nation, we grieve together. And at the end of the day, no matter your background, no matter your walk of life, we are all Americans. Every man, woman, and child in this country should have confidence to live free, knowing they are safe from terror in their own community. This tragic weekend was a stark reminder that the threats against our country are very real, and they are growing stronger by the day. Not since 9/11 have we seen so much bloodshed on our soil. Acknowledging the threat, radical Islamic terrorism is more important than ever. American leadership is more important than ever. The loved ones of those who have been attacked continue to be in my prayers. God bless.
I join my colleagues in their prayers for the victims, the injured, their families, and all of those that are involved in the Orlando tragedy. The senseless, shocking act of terrorism based on hate and spurred on by radical Islam. Too often we've seen this take place on American soil in San Bernardino, in Boston, and in Fort Hood. Even in my home state of Kansas, the FBI had to act swiftly to prevent another homegrown terrorist plot against Fort Riley just last year. I hope the victims' families know that Americans stand with them As Orlando rebuilds its community, so too will America. We will not be intimidated by cowards. Our nation will rise up and fight those who attack our freedoms and our way of life. There's no place where those who are committed to hatred and violence can hide.
Questions? Craig?
Mr. Speaker, your reaction to Donald Trump's comments yesterday on Orlando, his comments about an immigration ban, his comments suggesting American Muslims are harboring terrorists, and his comments questioning whether President Obama really wants to fight terrorism.
Well, that's a loaded question. So you packed a lot in there, Craig. First of all, I would encourage everyone, including our nominee, to work with us because we've been working on this issue for quite some time. As soon as the Paris attack occurred, we put together a task force consisting of our committee chairs to get ahead of this problem. As Leader McCarthy mentioned, we've already passed 9 bills here in the House of Representatives dealing with this terrorist threat, dealing with homegrown jihad, dealing with homegrown terrorists. We're going to be moving those bills again to try and get them over the finish line. I would also argue on the immigration front, we did pass into law patching the loophole of the visa waiver program. So we've already addressed one critical component of that. We've also passed a refugee bill because we want to make sure that we have a security test so that we know who is coming into this country and that we have properly vetted that person based upon the security threat that they may or may not pose to this country. And that is what we've passed also out of the House. That bill is sitting over in the Senate being filibustered by the Democrats. So we believe that we should have a robust security test to make sure that law enforcement gets the tools they need so that we actually do control who comes and goes in this country. As far as the Muslim community you mentioned, I think there's a really important distinction that every American needs to keep in mind. This is a war with radical Islam. It's not a war with Islam. Muslims are our partners. The vast, vast majority of Muslims in this country and around the world are moderate. They're peaceful. They're tolerant. And so they're among our best allies, among our best resources in this fight against radical Islamic terrorism. So I think it's very important that we hone that distinction, we honor that distinction, and let's remember we're all in this together. You know, we're not LGBT Americans, Republican Americans, Democrat Americans, Muslim Americans. We're Americans. And as Americans, we need to up our game to deal with and confront this real threat. We don't think the administration has done a good enough job confronting this threat. We think more needs to be done. That's one of the reasons why we put out a 67-point plan last Thursday to deal with the terrorist threat, to deal with our national security, to deal with homegrown jihad, to deal with homegrown terrorists, to deal with all of these issues, including immigration, foreign policy, and the rest. And that is what we want to offer the country, a better way to fix these problems and prevent this from getting out of control.
Yes, sir. Aside from vetting, which you want to perfect so that people don't come in, should there be an actual ban on, regardless of religion, immigrants from countries that have terrorist ties that we know are spreading terrorist ideology?
Well, again, we've addressed part of this issue with the visa waiver. We thought there was a problem where you had people from different countries with a visa waiver where they could come without even a visa. We passed a law addressing that. But we believe ultimately that we ought to have the tools where we have a security test, not a religious test, a security test, and we think that's the preferred route to go.
Speaker Ryan, but you said that Donald Trump's call for a ban on Muslims coming into the country was not conservatism. Chairman McCall has said that type of inflamed rhetoric can actually help the recruiting of ISIS. Was Donald Trump wrong to double down on his Muslim?
No, I stand by my remarks. I bet you do too as well. I do not think a Muslim ban is in our country's interest. I do not think it is reflective of our principles, not just as a party, but as a country. And I think the smarter way to go in all respects is to have a security test and not a religious test.
Constitutionally, do you think Donald Trump, if he were president, could enact a ban on folks?
That's a question. That's a question about immigration law, and you can go into the 1952 Immigration and Naturalization Act to determine whether or not that the president has that kind of discretion or not.
Last question, Speaker, on appropriations. How does the Orlando attack affect the appropriations process beyond a delayed markup of the Homeland Security bill? And second part is on Zika. When do you expect to?
Our conferees are making very good progress on Zika. Mr. Cole and Mr. Blunt are making excellent progress on Zika. That conference is making good progress. We're proceeding with appropriations. We've got defense right now underway. We delayed the Homeland Security markup just in case there was something that needed to be addressed in that appropriations bill because of this terrorist attack. Thank you very much.
Ryan,